Tonight we pick up on the end of Elijah and the beginning of Elisha. And it's kind of, as it says, discipleship, continuity, and mission. And so we're going to start in 1 Kings 19 with Elijah and Elisha. And beginning at verse 15 of 1 Kings 19, the Lord has given Elijah the rest of his mission, if you will, until it's time for him to depart from this life. And he's come to that place after having been in a cycle of massively deep depression, that the Lord gives him a task to get back on track with. And we've talked a little bit about different aspects of depression. I will tell people this, and when Scripture says to mourn with those who mourn, right? It doesn't always mean like, if someone's having, a bad day and someone they love just died, for you to cry with them when they're crying. Yeah, I mean, it can have that connection, but if you've ever worked with people that are in a place of deep depression, and you're like, come on, there's so many good things in your life, right? The song Count Your Many Blessings doesn't help you when you're in the bottom of a pit. Okay? And someone's like, oh no, it does. Because there's a rope and there's a ladder and the pit's not filled with fertilizer. Yeah, no, that doesn't help. And as you look at what the Lord gave Elijah to do, and we'll say that there's a negative 10 and a positive 10. If someone in a depression place, in a place of sorrow, is at say negative 4, you trying to raise them to 10 positive is not going to happen. You may be able to yank them up there, but the moment you're gone, they're not going to go back to negative 4. They're going to drop to negative 8. Yeah, Phyllis. Okay. Helping them come to negative 2 or even negative 1. And someone, well, they're still in the negative, right? But they can shift up the scale a little bit and be able to hold that. And one of the challenges that we've had a lot of times in Christianity is people are like, we need to get up to 10 again as quick as we can. 8, not everybody can stay at 10. You know what they do with people that are like at a 10 all the time and everything is happy, joy, and everything in the world's perfect. Blah, 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 blah. They give you medicine for that to bring you down the scale, because why? Nobody else can deal with you at the top of the scale. Okay? But the other side of that, if you can do something as simple as someone hasn't changed their clothes in 3 days, they haven't brushed their hair, and you can get them to brush their hair, put on a change of clothes, and go get a soda with you for 30 minutes. You haven't tried to bring them way out. You've kind of come down to where they are, but you've at least helped them up the scale a little bit. And a little win, a few little wins, a few little positive things to come back up the scale is a decent place to be. And so when you're looking at your life, he gave him big tasks. The tasks that God gave Elijah for Elijah's skill level were not big. He says to him, go anoint Hazael to be king over Aram. And then verse 16, and you shall anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, to be king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha, the son of Shaphat, of Abel-Maholah, to be a prophet in your place. And your brother, those are a big deal. Not to him. He's a priest. What do priests do? They anoint people. He gives him 3 simple tasks that he can do, but it also gives him a sense of, I still have value, because he had reached the place. He comes from the mountain with this fire coming down from heaven, right? And then Jezebel's like, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, because he came from such a high and now he's hit this low. And now he's out in the middle of the wilderness, and it's like, I just want to die. I don't want to ever, take me away, God. And God reestablishes his value as a person. He reestablishes that he has a place of value and stuff to bring. And this is going to come into play at the end of the lesson. The church as a whole has not done a good job of affirming people's place to be able to continue to serve the Lord, either in extreme youth or extreme old age. And I know when I say this intellectually, you know this. You do realize by the time you're 95, basically everybody you went to church with and everybody you've known most of your life that would have been your contemporary friends, they're all dead. So when the person says, brother, I feel alone, you know why? Because they are. And so, no, you got plenty of friends at church. No, they don't. Because at 80 or 75, the mantra for years in the church has been what? The young people are the future of the church. Well, yes, they are, and no, they're not. Because the church is never future. The church is always now. Because the future of the church is in eternity in the presence of Christ. And so we're like, well, we need to, get these young people to have the opportunity. You're right, we do need to give the young people the opportunity. But not at the expense of taking away from older people who drive value and sense of identity and purpose and meaning and being able to give and see that their giving back into the lives of others brings blessing and benefit. And this is why we end up with this gap, and I think I've told Ronnie and Tommy this before. When my grandmother dies, as long as I'm still alive, I'll probably catch a flight out of here the next day or the day after to Denver. I'll drop in, I'll hit a funeral, and I'll catch a flight back the same day. Because my aunt asked me last time, she said, nobody in the church, she said, there are people who know, she said, but the preacher who's here now, he doesn't know Grandma. My grandma is now the matriarch of the church. She's the oldest person in that church. And like anybody that's less than 65 has no clue who she is. And the preacher doesn't know her. And all the elders, because, well, she's a widow and my aunt takes care of her, all of the elders, they don't come and check on her. Even though they were all friends of my aunt, or they were between my aunt and my age, but they don't ever come and see, And so this thing, and when I say I've watched it all across the United States, if someone did something for years, we need to do our best to find a place that still affirms their value as people to continue to serve. They may not serve at the same scale as they once did, but let them put in, let them contribute. And so, and that you said, no, something that simple is telling him, go anoint these guys and start making the small steps to get back into life. Is huge. And so we skip down to chapter 19, verse 19 of 1 Kings. It says, so he departed from there. He found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he with the 12th. And Elijah passed by him and threw his cloak on him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, please let me kiss my father and mother, and then I'll follow you. And he said to him, go back, what have I done to you? So he returned from following him, and he took a yoke of oxen, sacrificed them, boiled their flesh with the yokes from the oxen, and gave it to the people, and they ate. And then he got up and went after Elijah and ministered to him. All right. When you read 12 yoke of oxen, read full barn of John Deere equipment for everything he needed for his farm. Someone
was plowing them 12 yoke of oxen by himself.
Sounded like it.
Yeah. Okay. So he has 12 yoke of oxen. He's the man who's in charge. He's working the 12th pair. Yeah, he's running 12 pairs of oxen. That means he's got 11 other guys. He's running 24, but the brother can turn at least 48 rows at a time. Now, Ronnie, I've seen some big farm equipment. I ain't seen anybody that can pull 48 rows at a time. Now, give John Deere and a couple others time. They'll find a way to get 48 rows, with one pass. But okay, so you've seen one that big now? Okay. Okay. All right, you got me beat. I ain't seen them yet. Yeah. Most I've ever seen is like 24. Yeah. Okay. See, well, I'm not in farm country most of the time anymore. And please don't anybody go, this is farm country. Union County is not farm country. Okay? It's rural, but it's not farm country. But back then, if you could run 12 yoke of oxen and have the servants, that was a major farming operation. That was big business. And I point that out because Elisha, being anointed by Elijah, he was already a successful businessman. His family had a considerable amount of wealth. And you say, you keep pointing that out. Yeah, because there's been this mindset that everybody was dirt poor. Well, he had 12 yoke of oxen. We were going over to Jacksonville the other day, and we came across this John Deere combine someone was hauling, and Catherine asked, and she asked me what the price was. I said that one's probably about $750,000, and pulled it up, and depending upon which year of that model, its average resale used is $600,000. At new it was like $825. And you said, now it's one thing to have equipment that expensive. It's another other thing if you've actually paid for it all. Now that's now you're in the business. His family, his land, he's done well. And you guys will hear this thing, right? God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And that sounds good, but let me explain to you. When God called Elisha, God called the qualified. The ability to do work, do it well, organize people, coordinate events, and know how to run a process. If you can run something in one area, you can generally run it in the other if you actually have those skills. And you say, well, not everyone was qualified. Moses wasn't. Moses was eminently qualified. He spent 40 years learning how to run an empire as a politician. Then he spent 40 years learning how to lead sheep in circles in the wilderness. When God called him at 80 and said, take my people out of Egypt, he didn't know he'd spend the next 40 years leading a bunch of people that believed like sheep and did like sheep, and having to lead them with the skills of governing an empire, because you walk around with 3.5 million people living in tents for 40 years in the desert and only have to deal with 6 attempts at mutiny. Man, that was some skills. That was some skills. And so this call of Elisha, it's a big deal. Most people forget Elisha was twice everything that Elijah was. But because Elijah's the template, that's why Elijah always holds priority. Okay? This past year, Saquon Barkley with the Eagles, he was that close to breaking Eric Dickerson's rushing record. But they have 2 more games now than they did when Eric Dickerson got his record. And Eric Dickerson had 2 more games than O.J. Simpson did. And O.J. had 2 more games than Jim Brown did. So you know who the greatest rusher of all time probably was? Receiving? Yeah, Jim Brown. Because why? Everybody else has to keep getting more games to keep breaking his record. you know. But these guys that establish the standard, they remain because they were the first one that was like that. And so, and we won't go to Romans, but all this stuff with Elijah and Elisha, it all comes over in the New Testament. The next one, though, that I do want to catch with this, he slaughters his oxen. He makes a complete break with his past and becomes Elijah's attendant or disciple. He serves. He serves. One of the young men that we helped go to preaching school, I tried to teach him what to preach for his first year. And all these other kids, right? They're in preaching school with him. They said, "You're the man of God. No one should ever tell you what to preach." And what I tried to tell him to preach was, I said, preach balance. Don't go in hardcore on every doctrine under the sun. Try and help people see some of the major connecting threads between the testaments. I said, because some of the things you want to teach, I said, if the people can see how all these pieces tie together, I said, it'll make it easier for them to accept some of the things that you think they need to work on, dude. And all these other guys that were, between 18 and 25, told him, you should never listen to someone like that. And he didn't. Last conversation I had with him, and we hadn't talked in 7 years, 6.5 years. And I said, how you doing where you're at now, bro? He said, I'm doing okay now. And he said, he said, I wish I would have listened to anything you told me. He said, he said, I think about everything you told me that I should do in my first church. And he said, and I do most of it now. And he said, no, I wasn't trying to coach him like, preach everything exactly the way I do. I wouldn't coach anybody like that. I was trying to teach him principles how not to make your life absolute misery in your first church. But he had been taught by a bunch of other guys who had no experience. Don't listen to the guy who's beat all the averages and is still preaching. Just don't ever listen to him. We who've done nothing know it all. Right? That's why when people are like, Father's president, if you were president, you'd be dead by the time they got inaugurating you from the heart attack. He said, well, I'd be fine, brother. Have you not ever looked at those guys' pictures? None of them ever go in with jet black hair that they don't either come out bald, gray, or both, and 3 steps off from being dead. Okay? Elisha is great because he can submit. What you got, Phyllis?
What I liked about him was that he it seems like it was uninvited, He was just out there running his farm, and then when he realizes he's going to be a prophet, he said, give me a double helping. He's all in.
Oh yeah, and he is. And
he's a servant.
He's very much a servant. He's a disciple. A disciple serves the master because the disciple has one goal. What? They want to be as much or more than their teacher. Not because they want to be, quote, more than their teacher, but what? They see the greatness of what their teacher does, and they want to do even greater things in a greater purpose. Absolutely. When the people who are following Jesus come to him and they said, let me first say farewell to those at my home, they thought they were being like Elisha. Okay? And Jesus says what?
Let the dead bury the dead.
Let the dead bury their dead. If you let your hand leave the plow but you touch it again, you aren't fit to follow me. And this is a danger, Brother Tommy, when people keep wanting to go back to the Old Testament. The highest in the Old is lower than the lowest in the New. Learn our lessons from the old, but realize the starting place for us in the new is higher than even someone as great as Elisha. Our call in Christ outstrips Elisha's call by Elijah. And that's where discipleship is supposed to start for us. And so when people talk about the grace of Christ starts you higher than the two greatest prophets in the history of the world, other than John. It's an amazing thing. And what's the difference? Ours is more urgent. They were under a time period where God overlooked their ignorance, but now he commands all men everywhere to repent. We have a whole different degree of urgency. We've got the blood of Christ compelling us. They had the blood of bulls and goats. Whole different ballgame. The departure. And let's go on ahead. We'll kick over to 2 Kings. What do you think he'd let me? Fail point.
2 Kings 2, 19 to 12.
2 Kings 2. Now, if you say, brother, what happened with 2 Kings 1? 2 Kings 1 is absolutely hysterical. I mean, a lot of guys get fried because they come to Elijah and they try and boss the man of God around. And then a third guy comes and he goes, I'm tired of nothing. Please don't fry me and my men. Would you please come with me? You know? So read the first chapter. It's actually, it's not funny. It's funny because it's our great uncle. And some people tried to boss around our great uncle, and our great uncle had no sense of humor about that kind of stuff. And apparently God didn't really care for it either. You know? But chapter 2, verses 9 through 12. Go on ahead and read those for us, Phyllis, real quick.
When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you. And Elisha said, please let there be a double portion of your spirit on me. And he said, you have asked a hard thing, yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if you do not see me, it shall not be so. And as they still went on and talked, and behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them. And Elisha went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. And he saw him no more. Then he took hold of his own clothes and tore them into two pieces.
All right. So, apparently, there was a time in Israel with, a lot of people just, stripping out of their clothes in public. It was what it was. He's got new clothes to pick up. Hey, I'll just rip these clothes in half while I change here in the middle of nowhere. A lot of us, and I do want to make this very quickly. Ask what I shall do for you. When the prophet was telling him, ask what I shall do for you, he's saying, what is it that you want God to do for you under my authority as the prophet? And so when he asks for it, he says, it's a tough thing. And he says, if you see me when I go, pay attention. Pay attention. And so many of us have been taught in church, right? Don't ask God too big, because if you don't get it, you're going to be disappointed. I'm going to tell you, go for broke, ask big. Go for broke, ask big. But brother, what if? Okay, if you ask for $10 and you get half, you get $5. If you ask for $1,000 and you get 1%, you still get $10. Now, would you rather have 50% of what you asked for, or 1% of what you asked for, when the whole goal was that you wanted $10? And you said, I don't think it works that way. I think it does. God has some weird thing that he likes to answer big prayers. Because, apparently he gets way more glory and he enjoys answering big prayers. And so, the question, ask what shall I do for you? What shall I do for you? And you say, well, I don't want to. He went to the cross for us. Romans 8 says, he that spared not his own son, but gave him up for us all freely, how shall he not with him also give us all things? Go for broke. Go for broke. I mean, I wish the church could get it in their head. Pray, and I'm just going to tell you right now, the future of the church, the magic number is not 150. The future of the church is 1,000, 1,500, and the playground and the grass between here and Tyler's house, an 8,000 or 10,000 square foot building, this scraped to the ground, turned into a parking lot, some other stuff done with the fellowship buildings, and we go someplace else. You do understand we're past that era where being located on the right road determines whether or not you can grow. Okay? He said, brother, I wouldn't want to be part of a church that's 1,500. True or false, Union County has changed. There's still a lot of great things in Union County to hold on to, but who understands what's come into the county? And he said, you came into the county recently. I have not had the desire to change Union County to be something other than what it is. I like Union County. When I put my name in the hat for city manager, it's because there were things I liked about Lake Butler and things I liked about Union County that I didn't want someone else to come in as a city manager who didn't like those things that were good about here to mess up by trying to run an agenda. That was one of the reasons. You understand the people who are coming in, they don't have country values, most of them. They don't understand what it means to live in a rural, small community. They don't understand community in general. The way that you teach them is for the church to become more than it's ever been, so that it becomes big enough to have a huge effect in the community, that through the church you can actually set the agenda for people's lives and the general structure of how the county lives. And he said, I'm not ever going to pray for the church to be 1,500. That's fine. That's fine. You all have heard me. I want every soul in this county. And then I want every soul in Bradford. And then I want every soul in Columbia. And then I want every soul in Baker. When are you going to get to Alachua? Eventually. Then I want every soul in Alachua. You know, there's other churches down there. Right? And I'd be happy for us to get every soul in Alachua and all of them to be 10, 15, 20,000 apiece. Why? Might as well ask big. What if you don't get your 1,500? What if you only get 300? Well, we'll still need a new building and we'll have the money to be able to fund it, won't we? Not for us. For our grandchildren's grandchildren. That's where I'm looking. I'm not looking at us today. I'm looking at a country, I'm looking at a world that's post-Christendom. The gospel will not hold the same degree of play politically that it used to. The church needs to make its pivots now so that our grandchildren's grandchildren will have the faith to teach to new generations. You know, so I'm asking big. I'm saying, let's go for broke. So that 200 years from now, there's still a Lord's church in Union County that has a reach all around the world. Right?
But Brian, we're conditioned as humans, Americans, I guess it's kind of worldly to some extent. We're conditioned to think large and big on our own personal wants and needs. A big car, a big house, big boat, whatever. But those are material things. But we're not conditioned, and I think that's, again, back to your point, where maybe we've failed to some extent. When we ask for spiritual needs or spiritual, biblical, church-based needs that tie back to basically God's Word, you know, He knows the number of hair in our head. Stop and think about that. What we may conceptualize as being big or large, oh, I shouldn't ask for that, to Him, in His omnipotent power, it's like us looking at a, electron microscope to see something that's the size of you know, a pinhead, if you will.
Right.
I mean, so we have to change our thinking. It's not about physical, material big, it's about what is spiritual big, and to God, spiritual big in our minds is probably minute.
Yeah.
And until we accept that, it won't change our thinking.
Yeah.
Or asking, if you will.
Well, and, you know, and I visited with Ronnie and Tommy about this. Right now, my goal is to go to Liberia in November. Okay. Now, translation, yeah, I need people to start allocating for the cost of the trip, and, you know, some simple things like to be able to pay for a couple suitcases full of tracts and Bibles to go with me. All right. And you say, why are you going to do that? They chime in like all the time on our services. I don't know how big the church is in Liberia. It is a crazy thing. Like, you know, it's Monrovia, Liberia, Lake Butler Church of Christ. That's what, and it's like, you know, they don't understand. You don't have to call yourself Lake Butler Church of Christ. They're tied to us. And the brother called. The brother called from Liberia while I was in the office one day. And you do know Liberia to Florida is not cheap on their end, especially. You know, 40 minutes, 30, 40 minutes. Please come to Liberia. Please come to Liberia. And you say, no, I'll go. I'll go. I want to go first time to see what's on the ground. And then if others want to come, once I've made sure it's reasonably safe-ish, as safe as you're ever going to be any place in the world, especially even Liberia. But, you know, what if 2, 3, 4, 10,000 people came to the gospel of Christ in the next 5 years in another country because of what we do here? You know, I'm pretty sure we're in the low 200s, low to mid 200s at least, from the different villages and stuff, but I'm just not sure. Just not sure. I know this, the churches over there that they have been planting, and they take Bibles, and they take our classes and sermons, and they show them for their church service and for their Bible studies, and people are obeying the gospel. And there's more people there who've obeyed the gospel since COVID than here. You know, you say, what does that have to do with this? As for the double portion, as for the firstborn's inheritance, we're not just heirs of God, we're co-heirs with Christ. Everything that's Jesus's is yours. And that's not just in heaven. You have all things now. We have all things now. We just need to be able to move and accept them by faith so that we can do this thing. Then mission, and what St. Basil said, the inheritance of the Spirit is for those who imitate, not only those who observe. If you'd like to see more of the power of Christ in your life, become more like Jesus. Become more like the apostles. What they say, you say. What they think, you think. He got his double because he paid attention. He got his double. Elisha learned to be like Elijah, and that's when he asked for, I want double of what you are. Because when you read the Gospels, pay attention to this. No one had ever been healed touching the hem of Jesus' garment. Until that woman. And Jesus says, so what's what? Right? And she says, I said within myself, if I can but just grab hold of your garment, I'll be made well. So I did. And he says, woman, your faith has made you whole. He said, you got healed of it, and now you got healed of everything. You realize from that moment on, the rest of what the gospel says is that as Jesus walked through fields, people just grabbed hold of the edge of his garment, and they all started getting healed just by grabbing the edge of his garment. He didn't actually heal anyone. He didn't like stop and go, in the name of myself, I heal you. He didn't do that. They just grabbed his garment as he walked through, and they got healed. Because why? Once one person did it, the faith of everyone else came up to believe it was possible. So with Elisha and Elijah. Once Elisha knew that he could be everything Elijah was, he says, I want to be twice what you were. That faith just, pow. Okay? And I go this last one. How does Elijah's ascension challenge our ideas of retirement or ending well? For years in the church, Ronnie, I've listened to people go, I taught Bible class when my kids were 6 years old in 1921. And I taught it till 1964. I've done my service to God and someone else needs to serve God now. Well, that's great. I'm glad you did it back then. Well, I'm retired now, brother, and someone else should do it. What's the danger of that mindset? Do what?
He thinks he's done serving, that he did all.
Think you done serving. What else? I thank God for old people in the church. Now, they may not have been as old as I thought when I was little. They might have been less old than I thought. But I think some of them were pretty old because my parents and, their generation told me, that these people were old. But I think about some of the old people who spent time with me. That later years, I've known a lot of people in the church that are the same age that they're like, I'm done with my service. What happens if you've got 60 years of living faithful and you decide not to put it into play the last 10 years of your life? It's gone, yeah. It's lost. And you say, well, brother, I can't do as much as I once did. But if you can do, because kind of to Tom's point, and I want to hit on this because and if I'm wrong in my connecting this to your point, Tom, feel free to chime in. We've got this mind that if we can't do at as high a level as what we've always been used to, we need to give way for someone else to do it. And the problem with that is, not everybody's made for the same thing. And if you drop out with what your skill set and knowledge is, because you think someone else should come in who could do it at a higher level, someone may not come in for a long time, and now that leaves a gap. Because this is the danger of capitalism. Capitalism says you only have value if your production level's high enough. And God says you have value as long as you continue to sow into the kingdom. And the kingdom is the lives of others and the gospel for His glory. It's not a question of volume of production, it's a question of faithfulness of production. We sow, we water, He gives increase. I'm glad you're here tonight. What's our invitation song, Greg?
I don't know.
We'll do 9:15. 9:15. I think that's a fountain free. Oh wait, yeah. Trust and obey. All right, see? Well, it's still 9:15. We'll trust and obey. We'll trust and obey. So prayer request coming up. I know we want to pray for the young people going to camp. I know we want to pray for the counselors and the other staff. We've got a variety of people that will be traveling, others on vacation. So we want to be prayerful for travel mercies for them. Matt Hand's mother, Karen, she had to have an additional surgery today. She had had a bunch of fluid building up that they kept her an extra day. Surgery went well. That fluid is off, so but continue to keep her in prayer. And then Eli Rogers, for those who know Eli, if you know Eli Rogers, I mean, I'm glad that he's in Union County, but man, that boy needed to be cutting country albums, when he was like 5, I think. His grandmother, Debbie Rogers, was diagnosed with cancer, and so Eli asked for prayers for her. What else do we have prayer request-wise that we want to be mindful of? Okay. Announcement-wise.
The McSpaddens, how are they doing?
Well, I was hoping you'd give me the update because you checked on them recently.
I called, but they didn't call back. I guess I gotta handle them. Or go there.
That's a good question.
He's still waiting
Yeah.
for
As far as I know.
the kidney,
But, okay. So, Ann, Phyllis, do your best to have a fresh update for us that we can share soon. Okay. All right. 4th of July, Greg, which is 5th of July.
We're gonna do it.
Okay. All right. So we're on. If you haven't signed up, or if you want to sign up to help, go ahead. We did not have this Wednesday, and we will not have the 9th and the 16th. We'll come back for dinner starting the 23rd. So the last 2 Wednesdays of the month, we'll restart our Wednesday night dinners. We've got that coming up. So, Greg, we'll leave it there. As we go back out into this week, I want to encourage us, think about Elijah, think about Elisha. Elijah had a significant time of weakness in his life of following God. And I remind us what Proverbs tells us: the righteous man falls 7 times. The only way you can fall more than once is if you keep getting up. And of all the things that the devil and the world and even your own flesh would like for you to do, and I need you to be mindful that it's all 3, is that when you're down, the world and your body and the devil always say, stay down. It hurts too much to get back up. That's what the world will say. And just, the other night I was watching the movie Yip Man, and had the old boy where he was down on the mat. And some of you are old enough to remember when Ray Boom Boom Mancini fought the Korean kid and actually killed him. If you remember back in the early 80s, that's when they started the TKO in boxing. That, if the ref said, yeah, he's standing on his feet, but he couldn't tell you his name or say the alphabet, this fight's over. It's because back in the day, if you got on the ropes, the ref wouldn't stop as long as you stayed up. And the guy kept getting back up. The guy kept getting back up. And you say, but brother, wouldn't it be better sometimes to stay down? Get back up. Get back up. One of the great things we learn from our Lord on the way to the cross. They didn't go fast when they went to a crucifixion. Jesus kept getting back up, and Jesus kept putting one foot in front of the other until he reached his destination. And when everything was finished, then he, on his own terms, laid down and gave over to the Father the rest of everything he had entrusted to him. And so you and I, as we go back out, and I don't know about here, but when I was a kid and we used to get in fights, sometimes the old men would shout at you. You say, oh no, the men would stand there and watch the boys fight. It was what it was. But if they liked you and they didn't like the other kid, they'd look at you and go, don't give him the satisfaction. And you got back up because you didn't want the other guy to know that you stayed down, not because he'd beaten you, but because he broke your spirit. And I want to say to you, as you go back out in this week, don't let anyone break your spirit.